Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our Sophos Cloud Webinar. So today's webinar will be presented by Nick Ross from Sophos. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to him.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. My name is Nick Ross. Let me just show my screen with you all. Here we go. So I'm a partner sales engineer working for Sophos, and that means I work with strategic partners that we work with here in the UK, including Bytes. So yeah, thank you again for joining me. I'm going to talk you through our Sophos Cloud solution and how that can help you protect your endpoint users and devices that are perhaps using various web-based systems such as Office 365. As a brief agenda, so I'm aware that a lot of you on the call today might not be aware of who Sophos are, perhaps never done business with Sophos before, and so I'll just give you a quick snapshot of our background and experience in the security space. Talk about the challenges facing businesses these days and how things have become a lot more complicated with regards to protecting endpoints. Then we'll have a look at the Sophos Cloud features and capabilities. Product development, so some of the exciting new things that we're introducing into Sophos Cloud this year, and then at the end we'll as Sarah said, have some time for question and answers. Just to reiterate as well, you will be asked to fill in a questionnaire just with any feedback you have, and if obviously you want to get in contact with somebody at Bytes and speak to a Sophos person and have a demonstration of our products, obviously just let us know. Right, so without further ado, Sophos Snapshot. So who are Sophos? We essentially are 30 years old this year, so we've been in the security space for quite a lot of time. We have a lot of credibility being a UK business, and in fact we recently floated on the London Stock Exchange. Very excited and proud day for us when it was actually announced that we were the largest UK software company to float on the London Stock Exchange in history, which is very exciting and very proud for us. We have over 2,500 employees worldwide. And we actually have a very large number of customers, so over 220,000 customers around the world using our products, and that equates to over 100 million users, give or take a few, of using our endpoint protection and various other products that we sell. We have very sticky products, and that shows that our products are very successful. Customers like them. Essentially, we have a renewal rate of over 90%, which is again very good level within the space that we work in. We OEM a lot of our technology, so although you might buy technology from other security partners in the industry, ultimately they might be using Sophos code in the background. So we have OEM partnerships with a number of companies I've mentioned there and a few others that we can't mention. As a company, historically, we've organically grown and we make a number of large acquisitions when it's suitable. So rather than trying to become a master of a technology we don't currently have experience in per se, we go out to market and find the best of breed solution that seems like a good fit for our company, and we actually acquire those businesses. And a bit more information about that coming up. We have a lot of credibility with third-party analysts such as Gartner, for example, who you may be aware of. In fact, we're the only security vendor to have a place in the Gartner Magic Quadrant as being a market leader in both UTM endpoint protection and mobile data protection. So again, a lot of credibility in the security space. Here's a word from our CEO, Chris Hageman. In his view, complex solutions aren't solutions. I tend to agree with him, not only because he's my boss's boss, but also because actually I think he's taking a very pragmatic approach there and understanding the challenges that face the companies that buy our products ultimately. Our products are enterprise class. They're designed to be, go toe-to-toe with a lot of the large security vendors that you may be familiar with and maybe using today, but ultimately the products, although competing, they're not as difficult and complicated to use. We design our products to be simple and efficient, easy to deploy, and easy to get up and running with. We recognise that companies don't typically have a massive security team necessarily that can focus on implementing, managing, and continually reviewing really complicated security solutions. So we really do quite well by making our products easier to use than perhaps some of the competition. So in terms of our sort of lifeblood or what we view, our sort of mantra, if you will, security must be comprehensive. We do have products that cater for all aspects of the security world. We're not just an antivirus company. We're not just a UTM and network security vendor. We're not just an encryption vendor. We have technologies that appear in all aspects of the security space, and so we can take a much more comprehensive view of how to secure your space. Security can be made simple, as we've just discussed, and is more effective as a system. So probably haven't got time today to go into detail about this, unfortunately, but as a company, Sophos, as I've just mentioned, do have technologies in all these different spaces in the security sector. We can bring a really unique selling point to the marketplace by making those technologies work better together and actually sharing information, as I say, between the endpoint, between encryption, between the network, and making informed decisions based on securing your platforms based on those different technologies. So let's spend a little bit of time just understanding the challenge. Back when I started working in IT, sort of 15, 16 years ago, found that actually, what companies were doing with regards to the use of IT was pretty straightforward. Typically, they maybe have a bunch of Windows machines connected to a LAN and using Windows servers for file sharing, for mail, and for a couple of other internal resources, but essentially they're all based inside the corporate perimeter. You may have one or two users, the CEO or some field-based staff who had access to those systems via a VPN, secure tunnel back into the organization, but by and large, most of the activity was going on inside the LAN. And as we can see, over time, the corporate perimeter has become somewhat blurred. Operating systems have increased in variety, so we now have to think about not just a bunch of Windows machines, but also potentially people using Android and Linux-based systems, Apple, iOS mobile systems, as well as Apple Macs, for example, and those users being both inside and outside of the corporate LAN. Potentially having to think about bring your own device and personal devices that are being used to access work resources as well. Servers have blurred, so they're no longer just inside the corporate network, but they're perhaps also put inside a DMZ, and services like Exchange Online, SharePoint, Link, etc. are being made available to both users inside and outside of the organization. And the proliferation of cloud services, so you may well have recently made a move towards services like Office 365 or Dropbox for storage, for example. And again, users expect to be able to use those resources wherever they are. As long as they've got an internet connection, they expect that service to be available. So the kind of view is everything everywhere. That in itself brings obviously massive challenges, and we recognise as a company that particularly in the public sector, where perhaps there's been cutbacks recently, there's increasing demands on staffing, on headcount, and so unfortunately security is sometimes something that falls behind as a result of that pressure and that workload. So we as a company are designing our solutions to be much easier to use and simple and effective out of the box, so that we can help keep you protected in this increasingly complex world. What we're seeing is a much more increased attack surface, so the fact that users are using multiple devices, they might be using a combination of Windows and Mac, iOS and Android devices everywhere and all the time. We therefore need to keep all those different devices that have access to corporate data protected simultaneously. One of the biggest challenges here is that cyber criminals are very sophisticated in their ways these days. It's a monetized area. It's no longer people just showing off their technical prowess. They're actually after contact details and sensitive corporate information. And so it's not very difficult for a cyber criminal to perhaps find out very easily what particular flavor of operating system a corporate environment is using, and then target their malicious software to attack vulnerabilities perhaps within those different operating systems. So no longer is it suitable just to provide malware protection. Most tier 1 AV companies, ourselves included, would say they're around about 99% successful in detecting malware, and that's great. But obviously, what we need to really think about is the missing 1 or whatever it is percent of malware that we do miss. I think we have to hold hands. Any company that professes to capture 100% of malware is lying, quite frankly. And we certainly wouldn't suggest we did that either. But what we can do is we can be a lot more effective of how we deal with security threats for malware that we don't necessarily prevent. And so a system that detects compromises, detects machines that have got some malicious activity going on them and they haven't been able to prevent that activity from happening is obviously really important. Further still, tools and ability to remediate systems remotely without having to necessarily visit that machine is something that's very appealing to companies these days, particularly if you have remote workers or working in distributed offices around the world. So let's have a look at Sophos Cloud. It used to be the case that if you were installing a managed antivirus solution and an end-user protection system in your offices, you would be installing it on a server in your organization and managing devices inside the LAN. Obviously, things have changed a little bit, and Sophos Cloud is no exception here. So we've essentially developed our product from the ground up to be hosted in the cloud. It's actually hosted, if you're interested, in Amazon Web Services, hosted both in the US and here in the EU. So when you set up a Sophos Cloud account, you're prompted to choose where you want your data to be stored. It's accessed from a web browser, so your administrator can be at home, on the train, on holiday, wherever they need to be in order to be able to access and manage Sophos Cloud. And we obviously manage a whole bunch of different devices depending on what your requirements are. It's very much a user-centric product. It manages users as resources, and the machines and devices associated with that user are just treated as any other. So we have single policies that apply to all user devices as opposed to having to have different policies for different types of device. It's the only solution that protects Windows, Mac and mobile as well as servers. So we can see here we've got users working in the headquarters location, perhaps using Windows or Apple Mac machines. Perhaps they could be using iOS or Android devices. We've got remote office workers as well. They're protected from the same cloud instance. Home workers and roaming users, so perhaps they're field-based and regularly in the car, visiting clients, etc. We can still protect them from the cloud. We don't have to wait for them to come back into the office in order for their machines to be updated and to sync usage information and reporting information back to our endpoint solution. And we can protect servers as well using Sophos Cloud. So Sophos Cloud as a solution is ideal for organisations that have limited IT resources. I mentioned earlier on, if you're finding you've got challenges around the staffing levels and headcount of your IT team, you don't necessarily have somebody that can specialise in IT security. Sophos Cloud is perfect there. In terms of distributed workforce, if you have workers that are in different office locations, they're roaming about, they're constantly using mobile devices, perhaps using their own personal internet connections at home in order to get access to work resources, again, Sophos Cloud is a really useful solution for those scenarios. And we're seeing a lot of Sophos Cloud uptake actually from our customers is being around tech companies, young upstart companies that are being born in the cloud. They're using personal devices in order to get started and to initiate their business activity. The fact that Sophos Cloud is hosted in the cloud is actually hosted on Amazon Web Services, hosted here in the EU and over in the US, depending on where you're located. Then those solutions lend themselves quite well to those companies. They perhaps haven't got a physical office location. Young upstart companies perhaps started from somebody's bedroom or dining room table, and so you don't necessarily have a server to be able to install an endpoint protection solution on. Just a bit of a sort of summary of Sophos Cloud before I go into any sort of detail. So it's easy to try. What I would encourage you, and I'll mention it again at the end of the presentation, is if you're interested in having a play with Sophos Cloud, it's very much a frictionless product. You don't need to free up resource or a server in order to install the trial. It takes about 30 seconds to set up a 30-day trial with Sophos Cloud, and very easy to get going with. It is cloud-based, so there's no management server required, as I've mentioned a few times now, and it just works out the box. It takes very little time to get up and running. It is complete. In fact, we're the only cloud endpoint product that is comprehensive in that it offers Windows, Mac and server protection as well as the mobile piece as well. So it gives a really nice solution that incorporates lots of different aspects of security requirements in one single interface. And obviously it's unique for the reason I've just mentioned. User-based policies, regardless of the technology they're using. So we're not really interested in what type of device the user is using. Essentially, we're interested in protecting the user regardless. So we can create, for example, web control policies that apply to that user, whether they're on a Windows or a Mac machine. We can apply limits on what users can and can't use, and again, that is a comprehensive policy that applies cross-platform. Okay, simple to use. Actually says on the side here, starting in 60 seconds or less. Depends how fast you type, I guess, but I typically can get a trial up and running within about 30 seconds. It's a single console, so a nice single plane of glass. So nice and easy to use. You don't have to worry about different tools to do different things. It's all managed from the same interface. Devices are managed against the user they're associated with, and I think the important point to make with Sophos Cloud is that it's very much a user-centric interface. I'm more interested in the user and their habits, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, and if we drill down into those users, we can then see the devices associated with that user, but ultimately it's designed to be user-centric. We've got some really nice server policies as well that adapt automatically to your environment. What that means is essentially they will do automatic whitelisting and blacklisting of applications based on the server role. And so, for example, let's say we were to protect an Exchange server or a SharePoint server, SQL server, that Sophos Cloud will automatically make exclusions based on that server type for you. It can be a very time-consuming process to protect a server, and we want to try and take as much of the time and effort and potentially risk out of that process by making those exclusions automatically for you. So Sophos Cloud is comprehensive. It supports Windows Server, Linux Server, Mac and iOS and Android platforms. So pretty comprehensive there, to be honest with you. We have web control functionality available in Sophos Cloud, as I've already alluded to, and we've recently introduced our Cloud Web Gateway as well. So if you've got mobile users using their handheld devices out and about to access work resources and potentially browse the web as well, I'd imagine, then we can basically proxy those connections through a Cloud Web Gateway, a device that's hosted in the web. We don't have to worry about backhauling all the traffic from those mobile devices back to your HQ in order to scan which websites they're going to, etc. That can all be done in the cloud, which is very powerful. We also have device control as well, so the ability to block what users are and aren't able to plug into their devices. For example, a threat that we regularly see within organizations is users picking up a USB stick that they haven't used for a long time, or perhaps they just found lying around. If they plug that into an endpoint device, that could have all sorts of nasties just waiting to be auto run off those devices, so we can essentially manage what USB devices users can and can't plug into their endpoints. So it is unique, as I mentioned earlier on. It's the only product with a single user-based policy for workstations, mobile and web control. It automatically identifies server applications and continually adapts that policy. So there are competitor products on the market that will do automatic exclusions based on server types, but typically they don't adapt. So if you ever change your server's role or install additional applications onto your server, typically those endpoint products don't actually do anything about that. They don't recognize the fact that there's been a change in purpose for that server role. Whereas ours does. And what you typically find is that actually the server protection piece of those products is typically, it's kind of endpoint adapted. So we actually have a specific area where we can specifically manage servers from Sophos Cloud. In terms of mobile, we manage users, not just devices. I've mentioned that already. We simplify the administrative tasks that you might typically have to carry out with mobile devices. So one of the biggest is deploying Wi-Fi settings. I see a lot of organizations that, as soon as you've lost control of the Wi-Fi password because you've given that to your staff, essentially any device could potentially be added depending on how your Wi-Fi network's been configured. So this is a really nice way of using Sophos Cloud to essentially remove that risk and actually say users can only connect devices I'm aware of and I can see and manage. By essentially deploying that Wi-Fi code as a payload of policy settings to the mobile devices I trust and want my users to use on my wireless network. I can set up Exchange, so I can, for example, configure Exchange Active Sync settings on all my mobile devices using Sophos Cloud. And I can implement password policies. This is just a simple example of some of the things we can do in terms of administration. Obviously, there's a lot more settings and policies we can send down to our mobile devices. But yeah, password policies are a really good example of that. It still amazes me how many people use mobile devices without a passcode or a lock key on them. So certainly if we're using corporate mobile devices, we want to be making sure we enforce those for any lost or stolen devices. Easy to enable app restrictions and compliance rules. So essentially we can specify what users can and can't do on the mobile devices. If they install stuff that isn't allowed, then essentially that device flags up as being non-compliant, and we can automatically restrict access to Wi-Fi, to the email settings, etc., as we already mentioned. Okay, web control. So web control through Sophos Cloud, there's nothing extra to deploy. Essentially, once we've deployed the Sophos Cloud agent to our devices, web control is just a feature we can switch on and enable, so we don't have to install an additional agent for that. It is fully featured. There's over 54 categories of filtering, and we can specify our own independent whitelist and blacklist of websites as well. So we do have a lot of control there with regards to how users can and can't browse the web, and that can be time-based as well. So it really helps keep users productive. If, for example, we want to stop access to social media during certain times of the day, we can do that very easily here. It works everywhere, so because it's a cloud-based product, we don't have to worry about those policies only applying to users on their endpoints whilst in the office. It can apply at home or even at Costa. Other coffee chains are available, by the way. We don't have any deal with Costa here. No hardware, so we don't have to have any physical tin, as I mentioned earlier on, to backhaul traffic from an endpoint to the HQ location and therefore scan web traffic. User-based policies, a bit of a typo there. So essentially, web control policies apply to a user regardless of the device they're using. If you're interested from a licensing point of view, we have a tiered licensing system depending on the features and the functionality you want to make use of. Again, we don't operate in a bubble, and we recognize that you might already have existing technology to deliver this sort of functionality. If you were interested in Sophos Cloud Web Control, for example, then it's included as part of our Endpoint Protection Advanced license. So just some screenshots here of how easy it is to set up a web policy. On the right-hand side, we can see here we can specify different categories. For example, we might want to allow certain traffic. Social networking is allowed, but productivity-related categories, they're set to warn. So the user isn't necessarily blocked from doing online playing of games or stuff that's deemed as being productivity-related. Or anti-productivity related. They're just warned and made aware of the fact that actually, we are watching them. What they're doing is being logged, and they might not want to use those websites during the working day. As we mentioned, the cloud managed endpoints, the policies work both on and off the network. So regardless of whether you're using a personal internet connection or office one. Real-time policy refresh. So if we make a change to one of these policies, that will be actually reflected in the endpoint immediately. Again, because we're cloud-based, we can pull that policy change down. We don't have to wait for a package of data or wait for them to next come into the office to receive that policy change. Very useful in terms of your needs, I guess. So around security, making sure that users aren't going to any nasty or inappropriate websites where they might be downloading, perhaps without even realizing, downloading pieces of malware that are web-borne. Acceptable web use, so making sure that there are only browsing websites that are appropriate for your company's activity. Productivity we mentioned already, and ultimately the tracking reporting. So if there's any HR requirement to be able to see what a user's been doing on their work provided device, then obviously we can do that using Sophos Cloud. So here's another example of the Sophos Cloud interface. As I mentioned earlier on, it's a single pane of glass. It's designed to be nice and slick and easy to use. We're looking at this one particular user, the events associated with that user and that user's devices. So we can see them all here in this one user section. We can also see policies that apply to that user. Obviously, we can apply users to multiple users if we want to sync with Active Directory and create groups that apply policies to all our users within an OU, for example, within all Active Directory. Then we can do that quite easily. A little bit of information about Sophos Cloud Server Protection then. Easy to manage, server-specific policies, so you don't have to have one policy that applies to all your servers. You can group your servers into different purposes, perhaps have different policies that apply depending on what the server role is. For example, if you're using some sort of terminal services or sort of Citrix Zen type functionality, you could pull all those servers into a particular group and have a slightly different crafted policy to those servers. Automatically ID the server environment. So as I mentioned earlier on, Sophos Cloud will automatically recognize the fact that that is an Exchange server, an SQL server, a SharePoint server, etc., and make exclusions automatically based on that server role, which again adds a lot of value. You can't underestimate the time it takes to configure that, whether it be yourself or somebody else that you're paying to deliver professional services. That takes a lot of time. There's a lot of risk there. Typos can occur quite easily, and so automatically making exclusions for you is going to take a lot of pain out of that process. Fast performance. So we've recognised that installing endpoint protection agents on servers can be a concern to users. As it slow down the performance of that server. Typically, we find we've got one of the smallest footprints on the marketplace. Obviously, it depends what features you enable and how many different policies you're applying there, but be a great opportunity to maybe test our product and install it on a cloned server in your environment and have a play with. But typically the feedback we get is that the impact is very low, much lower than perhaps some of our competitors when they swap out other third-party tools. And at the server level, we're delivering not just anti-malware but also HIPS, which is behavioral monitoring. So looking at the behavior of applications on a server and how it's interacting with other services or other folders, etc. on a server. We offer live protection, so if as part of HIPS we detect some fairly fishy looking behavior going on, we can actually do a live lookup to our Sophos Labs environment, which are our sort of threat analyst team. And do a live lookup to see if perhaps the behaviour that's occurring on a server at a particular point in time is reflective of a threat that we've seen elsewhere in the past. And we can offer web security on that server as well, obviously. So just some key features of server protection. Server-specific policies, we mentioned that already. Automatic exclusions. And just to summarise the protection features, anti-malware you'd expect, blocking of viruses, trojans, zero-day threats, and all that kind of stuff. But HIPS, the runtime protection, behavioural monitoring is really important, and live protection is ultimately something that adds a lot of value. Here's a screenshot of the server inventory. So actually Sophos Cloud is perhaps a very useful tool for other things other than just protecting your machines. Actually keeping an inventory of your machines is potentially very useful. We can see down the left hand side there the server names, the IP addresses of those boxes, the operating system that they're running, when they were last active, and obviously if we were to click on a server name on the left hand side there, we'd be able to drill down in much more detailed information about the policies that apply to that server. Any particular recent alerts, etc., that we should be aware of. So there's lots of other perhaps non-security related benefits to Sophos Cloud as well, and inventory is just one of those. So we can see here we drilled down into a particular server and we can see the history of events on there. We can look at the time range if we want to particularly see if something has gone on within the last couple of days, or if we want to look at a real extensive history over the last 6 months. I appreciate you don't necessarily always have time to log on to your servers on a regular basis, particularly if they're virtual. It's not something you necessarily do. You manage them perhaps from a more central interface, and so being able to see what's going on an individual server basis is really quite powerful. Here's an example of exclusions that have been made on this particular server for us automatically. So we can see here that the locations here. There's I think this might be a web server, for example. So certain IIS folders have been automatically excluded. I haven't had to do that on this. Oh, beg your pardon, this Exchange server obviously uses IIS. I haven't had to manually do that. This Sophos Cloud system has done that for me. Essentially, when I started protecting that server, it recognized that it was an Exchange server and protected folders for me automatically. So just a sort of roundup on Sophos Cloud Server Protection before we move on to have a look at some of the sort of exciting new stuff that's coming to Sophos Cloud. Easy to configure and manage. Yep, takes minutes really to protect. We can deploy our software centrally. So if you're using something like Microsoft System Center or using GPOs to deploy software, our Sophos Cloud agent for both your endpoints and your servers can be deployed in that fashion. Automatic exclusions or rules to automatically exclude, fast performance, great protection. As I say, we have a very small footprint and we get a lot of very good feedback from our products and compared to other products on the market. And one last feature on here that I haven't mentioned yet, which is lockdown hardening. So we recently introduced server lockdown capabilities into Sophos Cloud. Essentially, there's a padlock that appears next to your server. And it allows us to make particularly web-based servers or servers that are publishing services to the web a lot more secure from attacks from the outside. So types of threats we see, for example, with web servers, SQL injection attacks and form-based attacks. We can basically lock down a server to make sure that no additional applications can be added to that server without us allowing them. So very good at protecting those servers from malware from the web. Okay, so wanted to have a look at product developments. Application control is something that we're actually beta testing right now with Sophos Cloud. So we have, for any of you that are familiar with our traditional on-premise solution, we have over 40 categories of applications, and that list of applications is maintained by Sophos Labs. So for example, if there's a new FTP client or a new instant messaging client or version of Office comes out, Sophos Labs maintains those categories and automatically adds those applications to the various categories. We might want to block certain types of applications. It might be that we have a preferred flavor of application, a particular name of an application that we want to use within the organization, and we block all other types of that application simply because we don't know what that application is capable of. It might be that there are security vulnerabilities within older versions of Office, for example. With application control, we can block, allow, or limit application usage. So again, going back to the productivity aspect of Sophos Cloud, we can make sure that only certain applications can be used during certain times of the day, which is again very, very powerful. Here's a screenshot, an example of an application policy that we've created in Sophos Cloud. So in this particular example, we're perhaps blocking access to voice over IP applications because actually we've perhaps started using Link as part of our Office 365 subscription. We maybe started using Link within the organization. We don't want to have bandwidth to be utilized by other voice over IP applications that people might be using for their own personal purposes. We want them to stick to productivity tools that we can log and manage and monitor, in which case we can sort of craft users' experience and users the way in which users use their endpoints within an organization. Download reputation. So along with application control, we're beta testing download reputation right now. So this is again some exciting new technology. Sophos Cloud, essentially Sophos Labs maintains a live database of files downloaded by all the endpoints that are protected by Sophos around the world. So that's over 100 million endpoint devices. So there are quite a lot of statistics in there. Downloads are scored based on their risk and then therefore categorized. And essentially, if a user on a Sophos protected endpoint attempts to download a low-risk file or a file that has never been seen before, they're prompted to either block or trust and allow that download. So it just gives that extra layer of protection. For example, if a user does a Google search for a Java update or a particular tool or plugin that they want to install on their endpoint, quite often what you'll find is you get redirected to other websites that perhaps have less reputable versions of that download that also include the Google toolbar or some other third-party tools that try and essentially bloatware that tries to install itself on your machine at the same time. That's assuming it's something legitimate and it's just trying to get some advertising on your machine. Obviously, the download could be a completely crafted piece of malware that is trying to do some really nasty stuff to the endpoint as well. So, download reputation is going to really bolster the way in which we protect endpoints through Sophos Cloud. So some stuff that's coming soon. As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we've got a very aggressive roadmap for Sophos Cloud. Virtual server protection, first of all. So for a number of years now, we've protected VMware vShield guests using the vShield API, which is available in VMware's vSphere product. Essentially, if you're using VMware ESXi hypervisors and you're thinking about maybe moving to Sophos Cloud, in the next quarter, you will be able to protect VMware guests using vShield through the cloud. So that's something quite exciting that we're adding into our cloud offering. Local update caching, I put this one on here because some of the feedback we get from customers occasionally, particularly if they're looking at using Sophos Cloud in a large corporate environment where you've got an office of, let's say, several hundred or maybe even 1,000 plus machines. A concern is using a cloud hosted product is that those machines are all going to the internet to download their updates, their latest definitions, etc. And so what we are introducing into Sophos Cloud is the ability to nominate machines inside your LAN to essentially download the update once from Sophos Cloud and then distribute locally on the LAN rather than all of the machines all connecting to the internet concurrently. Our updates are very small, and so it's worth making note that actually this isn't a massive issue. However, we're introducing this technology to essentially put customers' concerns at ease. Obviously, if you've got web or mobile-based devices, that are connected directly to the internet, as I mentioned earlier on, they don't have to come into the office in order to receive our updates. And Cloud Email Gateway, so an exciting acquisition that we made just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, it was announced at the InfoSec show a couple of weeks back. We acquired Reflection Networks. Essentially, they are an email security company, and with that acquisition, we're essentially going to be introducing their capabilities into Sophos Cloud to essentially host a cloud email gateway. So if, for example, you're using Office 365 and sending emails through the Office 365 servers, obviously that technology is hosted in the cloud. It doesn't make much sense for your MX records and for your mail flow to be directed to a box in your office that scans email traffic. You want those emails to stay in the cloud and be scanned in the cloud. So introducing a cloud email gateway will allow us to have a much more joined up story with regards to how we can protect email sent through Office 365. So watch this space. All these technologies are being added in the next quarter, I believe. So an exciting time for Sophos and for Sophos Cloud. Right, guys, that's pretty much me done. So thank you for listening. What I would say is, if you've got any questions, obviously do try our product, have a play. It takes very little time to set up a cloud trial account. What I would say for those of you that are interested in managing Apple iOS devices in Sophos Cloud, it probably will take a tiny bit longer than 30 seconds, not much longer, but you do need to be aware that you need to have an iTunes account and set up something called Apple Push Notification Services. Essentially, you're creating a certificate that you can then import into Sophos Cloud in order for Sophos Cloud to be able to push updates and share information with your iOS devices. But that in itself takes minutes, still talking less than 5 minutes to get a Sophos Cloud trial up and running. So yeah, do have a look at our technology, have a play.
So Tony has asked, can we import a user from AD?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can to answer that question, Tony, we can essentially configure Sophos Cloud so that it's AD aware, and essentially it will be aware of all your Active Directory users and groups. Sophos Cloud is very much a user-centric product, so if for example you're protecting machines in an office environment, perhaps multi-user environment, Sophos will track users within your Active Directory that are logging on and logging off of the machines. other thing that I actually forgot to mention, which might be of interest to people, particularly if they're an existing Sophos customer, we're testing out a migration tool at the moment. So if they're an existing Sophos on-premise customer, one of the sort of reservations or concerns that some of our existing customers get is, the work involved in migrating from on-prem to Sophos Cloud. We recognise that, and we've developed a migration tool to try and make that process as seamless as possible for you. Obviously, there is some time involved. I'm not saying that it will be done in a matter of minutes, but something we have done is invested a lot of time and effort in making the processes as easy as possible. And again, if somebody wants any more information on that, please just let me know. Okay.
Keith says, is there any protection for Chromebooks? Does the vShield integrate with ESXi free version?
Okay, there's two separate questions. I'll answer the one around Chromebooks first. We've recently introduced Linux server protection for Sophos Cloud. I believe that agent would install on Chrome, but I'd have to check for you, Keith. My concern at the minute is that even if we installed that endpoint, it would class that device as a server, and so the licensing structure might look a bit more pricey than perhaps what you're looking for. I'd have to find out, is the honest answer. With regards to vShield, I believe it's vShield 4 and above only, unfortunately, as well. But what I'll do is, Sarah will have your email address. I'll find out the definitive answer to both those questions, and I'll get back to you if that's okay.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I think that is the last of the questions now. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you very much, Nick, for presenting, and please do feel free to ask any other questions that you've got, or ask for any more follow-up outside of the webinar. So thank you very much and goodbye.